And this post-budget dialogue will definitely be taking us 2 days. Today, particularly, our attention will be on to expenditure priorities for this financial year, 2020-2021, a very unique year at that, with COVID-19, lots of scientific issues going on. But tomorrow, Wednesday, we will be paying attention to financing the national budget and understanding the tax policy measures for 2020-2021. I know most of the people want to listen, or always love to listen, to the WIIFM, which is what is in it for me. So every Ugandan, Morris, is asking, what is in it for me as a Ugandan, as an industrialist, as an SME, as, you know, a cross-section. We want to thank all our partners today, the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, in partnership with the Uganda Revenue Authority, the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. We want to thank the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, the Bank of Uganda, Uganda Revenue Authority, and all the other partners. You can contribute to this conversation using the hashtag KnowYourBudget2020.
Thank you very much. I need to promise you, and I need to let you know, you the viewer at home, that we are actually observing all the SOPs given to us by the Ministry of Health. The reason I kept my mask on was to ensure that you know, myself and Mildred, her mask is here. I can defend her. Her mask is here, and we're going to try and observe all the Ministry of Health SOPs. We've ensured that everyone in our audience here is actually well distanced from their neighbors. As I mentioned, it's a scientific audience, and so we really don't have a lot of people in this room, but those that have to be here. We have our panelists, and much later we will be introducing our panelists. Some of our panelists will be coming to us live from their offices or the comforts of their home. But to open this conference for us, and maybe shortly we'll also have the Minister of Finance, I wanted to invite the Commissioner of Budget Policy, Godwin Kakama, to come and make a short introduction, because you're the host, really. Come and say hello, and then let's begin with our panelists who are already set for us. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, the moderators. My name is Kakama Godwin, Commissioner of Budget Policy and Evaluation Department. As of now, I want to flag off the meeting, the two-day meeting, but later we'll have the remarks from the Minister, and also the Permanent Secretary, Secretary Treasury will join the panel. I wish all the listeners a fruitful deliberations today and tomorrow, and I want to hand over now to the moderators to start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kakama, for the brief introductory remarks. And of course, we are out of time. We definitely have to start immediately with our discussion. Like I say, today's discussion is basically going to pay attention to the expenditure priorities for the financial year 2020-2021. Where are we putting our money, even when we seem to be in a very tight condition, and the effects that have been brought about by COVID-19. And without wasting any more time, I will like to introduce to you Dr. Adam Mugume from the Bank of Uganda. Dr. Adam Mugume is a seasoned economist and is currently actually the acting Deputy Governor, Bank of Uganda. He is also the Executive Director, Economic Research at the Bank of Uganda. He holds a PhD degree in economics from Oxford University, UK, a master's degree in economics from the University of Botswana, and a bachelor's in economics from Makerere University. He definitely has a very huge CV. He previously worked with Makerere University as a senior lecturer and head of Department of Economic Theory and Analysis, and he has been a visiting lecturer in monetary theory and practice and econometrics at the African Economic Research Consortium, Collaborative Masters Joint Facility for Elective Programs and Monetary Economics. He is also a faculty member at the Trade Policy Training Center in Africa under the Eastern and Southern African Management Institute, Arusha, Tanzania. Now, like I said, his CV is a very huge one. I will not be able to read through particularly each and everything. I want to go straight to what his presentation is going to entail, particularly looking at the financial and monetary policies, the interventions to safeguard jobs, businesses, and industrial recovery. And Dr. Mugume, I'd also like you to pay attention to the financial institutions, the banks. We currently have some idle, we would call it idle money, so to say, because the banks are stuck with a lot of liquidity because business is not moving as much. How do we expect to help them recover in such a time?
Good morning, listeners and viewers. I think that's an important question. Let us start from where I think you started. How do we ensure that the economy recovers? And I think that's where you're talking about the farms, the businesses, but also the households. How do they survive? And I think really that is a multi-faced kind of you require multi-faced kind of intervention. You require both the fiscal side, the government expenditure, but also automatically the monetary policy. Now, monetary policy in simple terms is where you regulate the money supply to ensure that actually once you regulate the money supply, it is not too much, it is not too little, to be able to stimulate the transactions in the economy. So when we say Bank of Uganda is the monetary policy in April, where we reduced the CBR from 9 to 8 and later down to 7, what we are doing at the Bank of Uganda is saying, let us leave a lot of liquidity in the system. And that's what goes into your second question. Now that we have left a lot of liquidity in the system, but then who is taking them the liquidity? So that's another question. But overall, I think once you leave in liquidity in the system, it probably means that interest rate will start edging lower. That's why we said in Bank of Uganda that when we reduce the CBR from 9 to 8 and then 7, at least we started seeing that lending interest rates, commercial banks, the rates they lend to private sector, starts easing down. We moved from around 19.9 in Feb. Now we are talking about 17.7 in April. So that means that actually gradually we started seeing that interest rates are coming down simply because commercial banks have liquidity. But then, even when interest rates are coming down, automatically there are no borrowers. Or in other words, with the lockdown, with the businesses closed, who is going to borrow? So that's a fundamental question. Some of the actions we undertook were basically to say, okay, once we start reopening, those businesses will start borrowing at a lower interest rate. Those also that had loans then can actually go and negotiate the loans at a lower interest rates. Normally, once you go to a commercial bank and say, you know what, I borrowed 200 million. Can I repay by borrowing? You borrow the same, but at a lower interest rate, and you repay the old loan. You come up with a difference. So that's one approach, refinancing actually your credit. You can use the same collateral and say, you know what, this is the collateral I had borrowed 200 million at 24%. There are people who had borrowed 24%. Can I reborrow the same amount at a lower interest rate and pay the old loan with obviously some charges? That is possible. And some businesses have already done that. And also households. So that's one way actually, that once you start using interest rate, once you start allowing liquidity in the system, then you start seeing those kind of transactions. Now, I'm not saying that is very easy or very fast to rejuvenate the activity, but it's one way of actually, stimulating activity. The other measure I think most people know what we have undertaken is simply to say, okay, commercial banks, you must restructure loans. And I think we have started, we saw very many applications, almost equivalent to 8 trillion, which, almost half of the loans. But then it is case by case. So the commercial banks in Nepal started evaluating each loan to see the merits of the restructuring. So far in April alone, we saw loans valued 1.4 being restructured, which means that now you can negotiate for a longer period of time. Now, obviously there are some hindrances. There are people who, when request for restructuring, commercial banks deny them, deny restructuring. Those are some of the cases we have had. There are the cases where you restructure and the commercial bank wants to increase even the charges after restructuring. Now, those are anomalies. So what we have requested is for each loan that has been restructured, we require more information to see, or if a commercial bank has denied a loan restructuring, then Bank of Uganda will require more information to know circumstances under which a commercial bank has refused actually to honor the restructuring. So it is an ongoing exercise, and we believe that some of those activities, combined with government expenditure, will help the economy to recover.
All right. You talked about commercial banks actually restructuring their loans. Loans that, like we've said, there is a lot of liquidity, people are not borrowing. On that end, then we get to look at the aggregate demand. Currently, we know that the inflation is quite low at about 2.7% or thereabouts, and it's targeted to remain slightly below 5% in the medium term. So the question that many are asking, do we expect the Bank of Uganda to actually print more money to be able to meet the aspect of aggregate demand? If yes, how are we going to deal with this? But if no, you're not going to do it, why are we not doing that?
That's a good question. Many people, that's in simple terms, what is a cousin to what we call quantitative easing. Quantitative easing can be a form of different structure. So the question would be, can Bank of Uganda print money and use helicopters to just throw it whoever we land on? That's what we mean by helicopter money. But remember that central bank has too many clients, commercial bank and the government. You can print money and give it to government. So when we say, Uganda government has borrowed from Bank of Uganda, basically it is a form of quantitative easing. And we have already done that. So we don't need to come and say, what, the government has borrowed from Bank of Uganda. But if you look at statistics, you'll see that actually, yes, government borrowed from the central bank. What do you call that? It is actually saying, okay, you printed money, you gave it to government. However, our role as Bank of Uganda is, even when you print money and give it to government, you make sure that that money does not cause inflation. So that's why we have to go behind the scene and start mopping the liquidity. What do we mean by mopping the liquidity? So when we hear that the Bank of Uganda is using repos, reverse repurchase agreement, we actually bringing back the money we have already given to either government or commercial bank. So we have already done that. So there's really nothing that we haven't done. So that's why I also said under our terms with the commercial bank, we said, okay, we can give you money for 12 months at 7%, which is CPR, provided you use that money to give it to the businesses. And we have already offered that. So that is a form of quantitative easing. In other countries, the central bank usually buys bonds by the private sector. In our case, we don't have enterprises that are listed, where the central bank can go and buy the stocks. So that's really, but in terms of assisting in terms of our clients who are the government and the commercial bank, we have already provided that, which is a form of quantitative easing.
And we expect this to have a ripple effect to the consumers, because looks like many of the monetary policies or many of the interventions are targeting manufacturers, targeting the supply side, and the demand side seems not to be balanced a little bit. Are you paying attention to that as Bank of Uganda?
No, we look at both supply and demand side. You are absolutely right that the demand is depressed, but at the same time, supply is also equally depressed. So you are looking at two cases. So the challenge we have is, given the two cases, the supply and the demand side, whom do you want to assist? In our side, we believe that probably supporting the supply side will eventually ultimately lead into the demand. Remember the famous saying the supply creates its own demand. I mean, those are the first principles, the basic principles in economics. That once you supply, eventually you start generating the why. Because the supplying of a good means production of a good. It requires employment, it requires use of capital. In that form, because you are employing people, people are working, then they are able to start generating demand. So we believe that in both cases, where eventually demand will pick up as people start borrowing from commercial banks. But for now, I think support. But by the way, also when we give money to government, inherently it is demand, because most of the expenditure on government side, some of it, including payment of wages, paying of the health issues, the health care facilities, it is all the demand side. So we are really both working on both demand and supply side, but probably with more emphasis on the supply side.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mgume. We'll be definitely coming back to you at a later stage. I would like now to engage Mr. Evaristo Kayondo. Mr. Evaristo Kayondo is currently the chairman of CASITA, and he comes with a wealth of experience on government and resource distribution, being at the helm of CASITA, and that's the Traders Association. Kayondo has gained the respect of many businessmen and women within Kampala, Uganda, and internationally. And we are more than delighted to host you today, or to be with you on this post-budget dialogue. Mr. Kayondo, we would like you to pay attention to the interventions for import substitution and export promotion. It's very good that whereas COVID-19 has had adverse negative effects, there's been some positivity, because at the beginning of it, we probably did not have any companies dealing in masks. Now we have so many of those that have been certified by UNBS. We had maybe 2 or less than those number of companies that were dealing in sanitizers. We have quite many. The government has said we have over 40. When we talk about import substitution and export promotion, what are the salient issues to pay attention to mostly?
Thank you, Madrid, and thank you, viewers. Seriously speaking, when we are talking about import substitution, what we exactly mean is actually that what we have been hitherto importing, we do it here instead of importing it, and we do it locally, and we don't continue maybe getting it from outside. That would mean that the jobs which we have been offering to these other people who are manufacturing it outside is actually offered to the Ugandans, and that would be very good. Then export promotion would have definitely mean that we fight to see that we do the export instead of continuously just importing without exporting, and that's where the balance of payments suffers. But definitely each of these has its own challenges. Like when we talk of import substitution, we mean that the goods which we have been importing, we have to do them here locally. Then you have to look at the cost of production locally, the skills which must be supplied locally, and then the raw materials, where do you get it? We already had challenges even when we have WUMA here, but WUMA will tell you that most of the the manufacturing they are doing locally, again they are importing the raw materials. So we need to specialize and to be specific, because we can't substitute all of the imports. That can't be feasible, because even if you go to US or European capitals, again you will get imports from other countries. What we mean, we should specifically target where we have competitive advantage, and where we have competitive advantage, we address the issue of cost of production, we address the issue of skills, and then we do it. Definitely we can't go for the entire list. We go for those specific items where we have competitive advantage, and then we go from, and getting from there, then these other policies can come in, policies like the fiscal policy, where taxes will be geared towards protecting those who have started locally here. But again, we have to be very careful so that we don't, again, protect inefficiency locally, because it can be also detrimental, in other words. But we must also be cautious that we are no longer looking at Uganda from the perspective of the country alone. We are looking at the ESC, we are looking at the COMESA. We have gone through these protocols, and once we have these protocols, it is as if we have also internal competition within these preferential trade areas. So we have to be very cautious, because much as we might think we are producing here locally, then the supply can be coming from the region and you are swept. So we have to be very careful, and then we take it up. Going to the sanitizers, very good, and it is a good initiative, but now you have to look at the sustainability of the market. How long are you going to continue with the coronavirus, and how are you going to continue supplying these masks? We are putting them on here, but going forward, 5 years down the road, what are you going to be producing? Will the masks be of style? Maybe you will have to see how you can sustain the market. Then look at the sanitizers. Those who have diversified into sanitizers, very good. But most of these we are doing the alcohol. They were producers of whisk and Uganda Warrage. But at the same time, seriously comparing the mask, the sanitizer market versus the beer which we are forfeiting and the evening parties which we could be enjoying, definitely the market is far lower. So when finally these people open up, you will see they will divert back to their whiskey and spirits production much more than the sanitizers, because it's more lucrative there. And even when it comes to government, that's where they get more revenue when it comes to. So export, I've explored a number of options in the export, and we have also challenges. Recently we had the webinar meeting, and we are discussing about the exports. Incidentally, even as far as primary production is concerned, we could go for primary production in the export sector, and we export like beans, potato. These are marketable elsewhere in the European countries. And one person was telling us that all of these can be bought on our shelves in Europe, but the fact is, once we make an order, it must be sustainable, because we do the orders in big quantities. That's where the cooperatives are very key. And if we are going to have a small farm producing and you think we will do the export, you will not be there. The contracts which you have been asked to supply, for them, they don't know failed seasons, they don't know that there is maybe rains which never happened. For them, they want the shelves on their market. And once it is a specific product, it must be designed such that it is that specific product of the attributes which you said we will supply, and it must be even with traceability, that once we get a defective potato on the London shelf, it must be traced back to Uganda and to the farm which produced that particular potato, such that if there is ostracization, it will be done for that particular farm, and you will know who to caution. So these are very key areas which we need to address in terms of training, in terms of skills development, so that we don't just bump into something which we don't know. I think for the moment I can submit, but there are so many other challenges which we have to address along the value chain.
I totally agree with you with some of the challenges. Now, government has highlighted about 10 products for import substitution and about 3 other services. The question is, do you have faith that we have the capability to be able to produce all those products, including steel and iron? But also, how are you as Casita planning on adapting to this now that it's no longer having to go to China or these other countries to import, but you now need to be thinking about exporting what is locally produced within the country?
Yeah, I think before we go into export, I would go for the easiest way to go, because right now in Uganda, maybe we think about export in terms of goods only, but even exporting services is very key. And what we have been exporting most is actually the tourism sector. And it has been hitherto #1 foreign exchange earner. And if you look at the allocation of the budget, it has been staggering between 0.1% to 0.4% of the national budget. And when it comes to the contribution to the GDP, it has been contributing 10% of the GDP, and 25% of the exchange inflows is accounted to that sector. Right now, even before we move to any other sector, it should be the intervention of this budget to ensure that this sector does not go under. Because right now, I'm the chairman of the tour operators, and we have about 300 companies in Uganda which are doing tour operation, and they have been responsible for this contribution. However, right now they are under key and lock, and they are not operating. But the intervention which we need, #1, is to ensure that they are sustainable, they remain open. They don't lose the skills they have acquired. What am I talking about? Let us first sustain what we already have, and make sure that these people can have their offices still open, they can pay their salaries, and retain their websites, and they continue marketing. That is #1. And then going for these others, it is very important that the import substitution is a little bit easier than export promotion. We start with the import substitution because we are now looking at the local demand, which is easier, and it is not yet as stringent as export. When you go to export, I will give you just an example of just agricultural products, and you saw how stringent it can be, because you have even to control the pesticides which you do on your farm. But for import substitution, once we go for these items which we have identified, very fine, let us protect these factories, and sometimes we can even go for these other big ones where we do forward integration. Instead of importing maybe the ready-made garments, you will import the raw materials, that is the materials itself, and then you start adding value when you are importing them in piecemeal, and you do the final product here. That is very important. And when it comes to steel and tube, those steel products, it is quite important that we can do it, and as long as we have the raw materials, then we process them from here instead of importing them. So we should be very particular in identifying these import substitution industries, ensuring that we have the right supply of raw materials from this place. And when it comes to these complicated factories, definitely you can allow the direct foreign investment. I remember I was reading about Tata in India, how they did it. It was very simple. For them, they accepted Benz to assemble their machines, their Benz from India, but they gave them 15 years. After 15 years, you have to exit. And after 15 years, this is when they came up with the Tata. So that one is an innovation. Then we have even incubators. Right now, I think we have URIC somewhere in Nakawa, and we have another incubator in Makerere. We need to look at this as an option, where government has the machinery, they have the outlay, and for you who has acquired the skills, you just buy the raw materials, and then you use those machinery, you just pay the service fee of using the machinery, and you go out, other than expecting somebody who has just graduated to go for full blast and start buying the machinery, put up the outlay, just wiring alone, getting three-phase connection from electricity, it becomes a very big problem. But if that outlet, that is the model which India took, and this is how they got the small-scale farm manufacturers, and then they started supplying. If you find a tata being produced here as a finished product, but you have so many other small factories, small-scale factories, manufacturers who are making nuts, the tires, the what. So no one factory is assembling the tata, but at the end of the day, you are buying from these small-scale manufacturers who again assemble and you get a finished product. These are the way to go, and we have to understand these setups so that we actually have a final product. But we have to be specifically going for those where we have competitive advantage. I wouldn't buy in for somebody who is saying like we manufactured the Kira in Makerere. You manufacture one of vehicle for 1 year and you think you are competitive. I think that is not the way to go. It has to go where we have a competitive advantage.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Evaristo Kayendo. We'll definitely be getting back to you. And I just want to remind our viewers online that you can be able to participate and send in your questions or your submissions using the hashtag KnowYourBudget2020. At a later stage, we will, of course, have a plenary discussion where we'll be able to feature some of your questions, have them answered, or get to have some of your submissions heard. For the next speaker, I'll invite my colleague, Morris.
Thank you. Thank you, Mildred. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're still with us, please use the hashtag KnowYourBudget20, and that's what we're using on Facebook and Twitter. We're also coming to you live on 4 different platforms across the internet, and you can actually watch us on UBC, NBS, NTV, and S24. I want to now invite into the conversation Rama Omonya. Rama Omonya is the program advisor at CSBAG. Rama, I don't know if many people noticed, and I was having a conversation this morning with a colleague from URA, that the theme for this year's budget did actually change along the way, and I don't think a lot of people captured this. But the theme we're actually also using here, and this is where you come in, because as a civil society person who speaks mostly for us, the Wananchi, we want to look at what the theme is actually talking about, stimulating the economy. Previously, we would have been speaking to jump-starting or working with the economy to provide jobs, but now we are saying stimulating the economy, given the scenario we're in with COVID-19. So stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, provide jobs, that conversation, do you believe was captured with this budget?
Thank you, Maurice. Good morning to the listeners and viewers online. That's a very interesting question, Maurice. But before I could respond to that, just give me a minute to make a rejoinder to what Comrade Everest has said about export promotion and also import substitution. On the issue of import substitution, I think you rightly pointed out that there are some which we shall not be able to substitute, especially those coming from the ESC. For example, Kenya, we import around $550 million US dollars worth of goods. Under the ESC agreement, we can't levy tariffs on them. But there's also an important factor, dimension, that we need to look into this, that when we do import substitution by also levying tariffs, I think we have levied tariffs on some of the goods up to 60%. There is a risk of creating a monopoly and also increasing the prices, for the local consumers. So we need to see how to balance this. We need to monitor it quite well to ensure that we are not making life difficult, for the average person who accesses some of these goods at a cheaper price. On the export promotion bit, I think you rightly pointed out on the issue of the need to improve on the quality of our products, but there's also another dimension that we need to focus on. I have observed for quite a while that our missions abroad are premised on the old thinking of diplomacy. Here now, most missions, including some of them in Uganda, if you visit them, you might actually think they are promotion agencies for the goods and services that comes from their countries. Just entering it, you will even see some of the things they're talking about. So we need to do that in order to ensure that the Everest Kayondos here do not have to sweat thinking, how will I get a market in Europe? Yet we have many missions in Europe. So that's an area that we need serious investment. But also, we need to see how we harmonize some of the policies when we talk about import substitutions. We have the tax policies, we have the investment policies, we have the land policies, all of them, the trade policy, the industrial policies. We need to harmonize all of them to ensure they're speaking to one so that we can harness this. One example I can tell you from what he has given about Tata. That example about Tata was important for 3 reasons. One, for any FDI to create the impact you want in your country, there must be 3 things principally. One, they must be able to transfer technology. 2, it must be able to transfer capital. 3, it must be able to transfer skills. Now, in that example, Tata managed to transfer all the 3. In Uganda, I've had this discussion with many people in government, especially Uganda Investment Authority, to ask them, do we have a mechanism to track these FDIs? How much capital are they transferring beyond what they state in their investment proposal? How much do they transfer actually here in terms of capital? How much technology do they transfer? And technology, we don't mean just the physical, infrastructure. It's a whole range of intellectual property. Example, how many inventions do they file, trademarks and other, do they file in Uganda? All those goes on to improving on, the improvement we're talking about. So if we don't observe those 3, the import substitution, the export promotion, all the things we're talking about will always remain in paper because we don't have even the mechanics now to even monitor that. So coming back to your question, first of all, we would want to, I think, empathize with the government for where they find themselves in. Why I'm saying government? Because principally, they are the ones charged with the responsibility to do the budgets and planning. A government is a very complex entity, and small disruptions in the planning system can cause a lot of problems. COVID-19 came at a time when we were concluding our budget process in March. Ministerial policy statements were already written, presented to Parliament to be discussed, and was discussed and passed in the middle of the COVID-19. When the Honorable Minister presented his budget, he said the last bit of the statement, the final statement he made was that we are coming back to Parliament with revised proposals on how to factor in concerns brought in by COVID-19. And while it sounds so easy to do that, in practical terms, it's a very complex thing because our budget process starts from the grassroots. And now, if you said you want to revise, are you going to start from, again, the grassroots where inputs were made? Or are you going to start, from the mid-level management, technocrats, and all that? So it's a very complex process that even the outcome we think might be very problematic, especially for the people who gave the initial input into this budget when the budget framework paper was developed in December, November and December. So the change in the theme, I think, was a realization that we needed to ensure that we actually stimulate. We were not going to, again, jumpstart things, we needed to stimulate because we're in the middle of a crisis, and we need to see how we make sure that most of the businesses don't collapse, the welfare, are improved, and all that. But if you look at the budget as presented by the Honorable Minister, both the revenue and then the expenditure sides, there are already challenges that we are facing. So far, we have been told by Minister of Finance that the shortfall by URA for the financial year 1920 will be around 3.5 trillion shillings. And I know they don't have a comprehensive data yet. That's a projection. It could even be more. We have been told that they are revising the revenue expenditure for 2021 by 18%. That's 2 trillion from 21.8 trillion to 19.8 trillion. Now, while it may look easy to say we are revising this downwards and all that, it has serious implications on the budget performance. Our budget currently, the 45 trillion, let's assume we are still operating on a 45.4 trillion. About 18 trillion of that is going to recurrent expenditures, which is paying wages and non-wages. We are generating now, as we said, we are revising our targets for 2021 to 19.8 trillion. That means we are only 1.8 trillion shy of what we are spending in our country. Why is this one important? It's because normally recurrent expenditures are financed by domestic revenues. You do not want to borrow to finance recurrent expenditures. You borrow to finance development expenditures. Now we're already caught up in a trap. That's just a difference of 1.8 trillion. That means almost all the money we are raising, we shall be putting into recurrent expenditure. So it begs a question, and most of the donors and development financiers have always said this, that we finance, first of all, they're not putting money into the budget. Most of them, they're off-budget support. So it makes it very hard for our people in government to have control over how these expenditures are done. They can only control much what is on their side, but what is coming from there is hard. But also, most of them do not want to finance recurrent expenditures. And now with the shortfall in revenue for this year, there's high likelihood that some of the commitments, such as salaries, might build into arrears for next year. So there are a lot of salaries that will go into next year, which has not been paid, which we have to pay next year. But remember, again, next year, we're already projecting, a shortfall by 2 trillion. And that means we are in a very big trap. So what all this means is that we need to be very prudent in how we manage the resources that we have. For example, when we say we are going to put 1 trillion into UDB, I think it's easy to say we are going to put 1 trillion into UDB. But the most difficult task is how are we going to translate that 1 trillion into a stimulus package that we all need. By now, we would expect government to have come up with, first of all, setting up a committee, a multi-sectoral committee, to review and set up terms on how this 1 trillion will be accessed. Because as you know, most of the SMEs in Uganda are not, even those who are very formal, most of them are kind of dodgy one way or the other. Could be because of circumstance or other things. They may not have filed tax returns for the last 3 years or so, and yet you might want to condition some of accessing this stimulus package through, because of their compliance with that. Some of them could have not filed payee, NSSF and all that. So as we speak now, we are left with only less than a week to the new financial year. And we are not yet clear on how that stimulus package of 1 trillion will be operationalized. No businesses understands what will be required of them. There's no serious committee looking into these issues. So we think that it's not just about saying we want to stimulate this economy by putting this. We want to see the details of how this is so that everybody is prepared in order to access this. Secondly, there are, we also talked about the microfinance support, We all know that microfinance institutions is a very good model on one hand. It enables, it gives finances to very informal businesses, especially like market women and all that, who have no registration, no documentation at all, but they access financing. But the flip side of that is that if you study their interest rates, you might even find they reach up to 100%. Around 2005, government tried to intervene to set up interest rates for microfinance institutions. It was very difficult. I think the government failed. So we need to be in a situation where we can help microfinance who take a bigger risk in lending to undocumented businesses, but also on the other hand, taking a lot from them. Because if you take even just 50% of interest rate, you're taking the entire business. Interest, profit plus capital. So this person can't grow. So we also need to see that the money we are putting as part of this stimulus into that sector, we understand how it will play out. It doesn't kill the microfinance institutions because of the risk averseness, but also doesn't kill the people who are on the ground doing that. The other area, spending area, which we think can also act as a stimulus, although not directly, is on the health sector investments. We know very well that health sector plays a very critical role in the development of an economy. In fact, the World Health Organization, I think around 2009, commissioned a very important research, and I think the conclusion was invest in healthy country, you'll get a healthy economy. And we have seen so far, whereas we are crying about the impact of this COVID-19, there is something that we wish government can explore and do a little bit study into it to find out. If you went to most of the health centers, you will find there are very few people in the health centers. Of course, there are reasons that perhaps maybe issues of mobility and all that, but there are also anecdotal evidence showing that there is a significant drop in terms of diseases that are caused, by hygiene, because we have gone through a period of about 3 months where we are implementing serious hygiene measures, washing hands and all that, sanitizing and others. So I think we need to see how can we invest more into primary health care, and at a local health center 3 level than more at a national level. Most health centers most districts in Uganda receive health budget, I think an average of about 4.5 billion shillings, most of the districts. Those with referral hospital, there are about 13 of them, they get around 12 to 13 billion shillings annually. But if we increase investment at that level, at the health center 3, 4, and then referral hospitals, we can actually significantly cut our health expenditures, at the national level. Right. So we need to see where we put a little more money in that regard.
All right.
Yes.
Rama, I want to stay with you because you touched on one of the stimulus packages, or one of the areas that was addressed by the budget on the 1 trillion for UDB, which again is a debate again in Parliament, and you know why. But let me share with you the other areas of interest which the budget was speaking to based on the stimulus package. So the areas around the SMEs, on issues of corporate tax and the presumptive tax. There was the conversation that everyone has been talking about, deferring of payee. And I need to mention it was deferring of payee, not removing of payee. There were those who expected payee will not be captured in their salaries for June and July, but it's deferring of payee to September. There was the waiver of interest on tax arrears. There was the issue of support to water and electricity utilities in order to ensure a consistent supply, expenditure payment on outstanding VAT refunds, payment of domestic arrears, and then you mentioned UDB, so I'll not go to UDB. There's the issue of capitalization of UDC itself, and finally, boosting the funding to Uganda Industrial Research Institute, which of course goes a long way in driving innovation and science in this country. Rama, many would say the budget speaks to these things, and it's captured in there, that there is there's goodwill from the budget. It's the financing that we are kind of addressing and saying, will we be able to meet that goodwill that government has put forward?
That's very interesting, Maurice. There's always a difference between stating what you want to do and then doing what you want to do. We always state very nicely what we want to do. If you read most of our policies, we state very nice things we want to do. But how we do them becomes a problem. So looking at the tax interventions, the deferment, first of all, I want to say it's good. The government must have been caught up between a hard place and a rock to waive it and lose the revenue, or go ahead and implement it and then risk, businesses collapsing. So it's a very hard decision for government to make, and we really sympathize with them. But the effect of, say, deferment is actually front-loading the cost, because after 3 months, you will realize you need to start paying this. So after 3 months, you wake up, you have to file your tax returns, you need to pay your tax liabilities, and yet you are beginning to pick up your business. So I know this is how to start it, but we need to be very observant on how this goes. We should not take this as already cast in stone. Government should be able to revise this. But I think the most important thing that government needs to begin thinking going forward is the issues around the effective rates of taxes, especially corporation income tax and then the personal income tax. I also do private legal practice, and we do restructuring for businesses and all that. Some of the businesses that we interface with, one of the biggest problems is always, compliance, with a complex tax systems. And many of them find themselves either in running battles with the URA because of the tax assessments, going through tax appeal tribunals, having a huge sum, 30% of, put into as cost and all that before you can go to any tribunal. So all these kind of things affects businesses. As a business, you want to see a business person thinking, how do I expand my business? How do I expand my revenue? How do I expand my production? But you have all these running battles. So there are countries which, for example, have reduced, so much their corporation income tax and personal income tax, so that they give room to corporations to do that. And how do they recover that? They come to non-tax revenues. So far, we get on about, I think, less than 2 trillion from our non-tax revenue. And that's largely because most of the sources of the non-tax revenues are embedded in laws, some of which were made in 1990s and early 2000. For example, you go to do a land search, and the official fee, say, is 10,000. Yeah? This was made in early 2000. Today, we could have revised that and would be getting 50,000 or even 100,000, depending on the type of land tenure you are trying to do a search on. There's so many of these. If we only go back and revise the fees, the dues, the fines in our legislations, I can tell you that we can raise the non-tax revenue from 2 trillion that we get up to even about 8 or 9 trillion. I implore government to do a comprehensive analysis of this proposition. Then by doing that, we can reduce the effective rate of corporation income tax and then also the personal income tax to free businesses time to look at how to expand business, generate more revenue, and pay more taxes through indirect taxes such as VAT and excise duty instead of this. There are businesses which we know who have closed shop because of their interactions with URA. The fights they've had with the URA, then you end up having a huge tax liability, which cripples the business entirely. So we need to look into this if we want to see that businesses are actually getting, this is a long-term proposal, but we need to start the conversations now and then the actions now. Otherwise, some of these tax proposals, for the short term, they may look good, but we think after 3 months, we might find that we have actually done very little to improve on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rama. And I want to inform our viewers and those of you who are here with us that we will be joined very shortly by 2 eminent persons, the Honorable Victoria Sechitoleko and also the Chair of the Private Sector, the Chair of the Uganda Manufacturers Association, Ms. Barbara Murana, who will be coming to us via our online platforms, but that will be very shortly. I want to come back to you, Dr. Adam Mugume, and based on the conversation you already had with Mildred, and the question is that the interventions mentioned and captured both in the State of the Nation, the interventions captured also in the budget itself, spoke to the issues around the fiscal area. But you, as the supervisors of the monetary part of this budget, there was the conversation on bringing down the interest rates and being able to allow Ugandans borrow money at affordable rates that could stimulate the economy. However, even with bringing down the CBR rate, which you did very few weeks ago, there's still been less interest in borrowing because of the situation we're in as a country right now. Do you want to speak to what else we will have to do as a country to address, first of all, the conversation on stimulating the economy, which the budget is speaking to, but also as the supervisors of the financial sector, how you're able to support that stimulation of the economy?
Thank you for the question. As I said at the beginning, we have 2 clients. We have the Ministry of Finance or the government and also commercial banks. It is true that normally when the economic activity is going down or is very slow, commercial banks are hesitant to lend because once economic activity starts going down or slows down, it automatically means that their non-performing loans increase, and so they are really hesitant in terms of creating new loans. That's why we are saying that, yes, even those who had loans, you can actually finance the loan by paying off the other one and borrow the new one at lower interest rate. I think that's one angle. But the question is, suppose the private sector or people don't borrow, the businesses. You have another client called the government that wants to borrow. Remember, the government also can now, by issuing securities, you have had the discussion of tax shortfall. How do you refinance it? Once you still have a commitment as the government in terms of expenditure, it automatically means they have to borrow domestically. So it automatically means that once the government now wants to borrow now in the current circumstance where the liquidity is, it will do it at a lower interest rate in terms of yields. So if it is to spend, say, on health, if it is to spend on other activities, including whether it is recapitalizing UDC, whether it is giving money to microfinance support center, whether it is giving money to through Myoga circles, the 300 billion or so in whatever. Now the government can borrow at a low interest rate from, the public. Yields are lower. You have to start declining because liquidity is available, and commercial banks are not lending, and be able to support activity in that angle. Then the question will be, now commercial banks normally work with a lag. Now, will they reduce interest rate further beyond 7.7? We are pushing them equally. Now, ideally, the central bank can impose an interest rate on commercial banks. But that is unmarket friendly. So if, in other words, if the governor and the Minister of Finance decide that the commercial banks, I know probably just preempted the whole thing.
I was waiting for you to say that, but please continue. I am more excited to hear what you're going to say.
It can, but again, that is anti-market. So when we did liberalization, incidentally, that phrase, that clause, it remained in the Bank of Uganda Act. The Bank of Uganda Act actually states that, yes, in particular circumstances, the governor and the Minister of Finance can impose a particular lending interest rate. It is there in the Bank of Uganda Act. So, but why we don't use it is simply because we believe that that is unmarket friendly. And we also know that actually the structure of the financial system, the way it is, where you have few savers, is the problem. So you have one pension sector that is giving long-term loans to commercial banks and is giving them money at 10%. So if a commercial bank is borrowing a time deposit rate from pension at 10%, you want the commercial bank to lend it at what rate? So, and we know that the problem is really on the supply side of the loanable funds. Commercial banks intermediate between a saver and a borrower. So if the savers are few, or if the savers, you have one or two dominant ones that have the monopoly of the funds and are willing to give the commercial banks money for 1 year at 10%, a commercial bank, after putting on also its costs, will edge up the lending interest rate. So those are the structural issues that may not necessarily be able to remove them within a short time.
All right.
As I said also, government also borrows. Okay? So all those determine at the end of the day what commercial bank is going to see in terms of opportunity cost of the funds and be able to lend and the profitability.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adam Mugume. If you're watching us, you are watching the very first post-budget e-conference brought to you by the Ministry of Finance and Uganda Revenue Authority with partners CS BAG, Siatini, and of course, Private Sector Foundation Uganda. I want in a very special way to recognize the presence of the Director Budget, Kenneth Mugambe, who is here from the Ministry of Finance, and also the Commissioner General URA, who is also in the building. Just in case you're wondering whether we are speaking to the Commissioner General in this conversation, yes, he's here, and he will, of course, tomorrow be part of this conversation. I want now to invite another participant, a panelist on day one, the Honorable Victoria Sechitoleko, who is joining us live. Victoria, if you can hear me, I wanted to bring you into this conversation. I'm not so sure if Victoria can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. How are you, Maurice?
Fantastic, Victoria. So, Victoria, let's speak to promoting livelihoods and creating jobs through enhanced agricultural production, productivity, and the related value chain amidst COVID.
Yeah, Maurice, of all those words you have just said, the most important words are only two: value chains. What has always been missing whenever Uganda has attacked agriculture is doing things piecemeal. I'm glad that now not only the Minister of Agriculture is agitating for value chains, but the Minister of Finance and everybody else is talking value chains. I sincerely hope that even URA will start looking at value chains. Because right now, we are talking about import substitution. We all looked at the imports of last year and everybody was really shocked as to how much agricultural products were being imported, which could actually be produced within Uganda. Why was that happening? It's because we do not have the quality, neither do we have the quantity. And why don't we have the quantity? Because we have not settled on one value chain and developed it from beginning to end. How do you do that? The most important thing about agriculture is that actually agriculture may have that word culture, but it is a science. And with science, things change every year. That is one. Two, in any country where there is a government, the government is responsible for all the public works, chief among which is skilling the population. For as long as the population is not skilled, however much you push, it will not work. So we have been putting some effort in giving farmers extension services. But talking to a farmer who is illiterate is more about doing things scientifically. Now that we are talking scientifically, is more difficult than if you were talking to an educated farmer. So agriculture, being the bedrock of Uganda, has to start with education. We have to give the right skilling to our people. And then we have to have the right policies and regulations in place. What do I mean? If you are going to export now, for example, now that the quality has been changed, there are regulations, there is everything, you need the right people in the Ministry of Agriculture, meaning the skilled people in the Ministry of Agriculture, to ensure that whatever we produce is up to standard, the way we handle it is up to standard, and the way we ship it is up to standard. Those people don't just wake up, do 1 degree, and you think they are ready. What I did not see in this budget is a training program for the people who are handling this sector. So that is one. That may also explain why we have issues handling a sector by value chain, because we do not have people who are actually majored in value chain management. If you put out a job tomorrow looking for people who have expertise in value chain management, you'll, for once, not have 1,000 people applying. We need to rectify our skilling so that we can do what is required of us as agriculture. But having said that, everybody is saying we should go into manufacturing, and most of this manufacturing should be agriculture manufacturing. Once again, the quality and quantity of what is being produced by the farmers is what will determine how much we can manufacture and what quality we can manufacture. Somebody earlier spoke about being in position to produce sanitizers. We were able to produce sanitizers in such a short time because the whole area of Busoga had been turned into sugarcane plantation. And because that sugarcane plantation was there, when we went to look for the alcohol, it was available. Now, if we had another region, maybe majoring in maize, and maybe another region with a beans value chain, the beans would not have run out during the first week of lockdown. So, one, we need to skill our people. We need to educate our people so that every farmer is actually educated. Then two, we need to skill our people so that those people who are regulating and supervising are equipped technically to do their job. Then three, we need to handle agriculture sector by sector. But having said all that, let us avoid at all costs turning Uganda into a nanny state. What do I mean? Stop planning and even putting it in the budget that you are going to buy this for the farmers and you are going to buy that for the manufacturers. Please, let government do its job and let the private sector, the farmers, do their job. I read somewhere that they are going to buy seeds. What seeds are you going to buy for us? These days, what the whole world does when you want to work with the farmers, you give them vouchers. And then they go and buy the seed of their choice at the time of their choosing. You don't give them cash. You don't give them physical seeds or seedlings. Give them vouchers. And then what do we want government to do? Work as a value chain. Just ensure that those community centers or those investors who have invested in silos are there to buy what I'm producing on time. One of the issues we had during COVID was with Posho, was the maize meal which was being brought. A lot of it was not fit for consumption and it was destroyed. The question is, if it had not been brought to Nakawa and UNBS found it there and actually disqualified it, what was going to happen to it? Because that is the maize we had. So is it because we, the farmers, don't know what we are doing? Are we bad people? No. 2019 was very wet. We could not dry that maize in the way it is required, and there is no way anybody is going to buy and give every farmer a dryer. So what do I suggest? Once again, once again, going back to government, my suggestion is let us equip those people. For example, if somebody is already managing a silo, give him a second one and a third one, but make sure that he's part of the value chain. He can buy from the small-scale farmers. Talking about small-scale farmers are not going anywhere. In fact, Uganda is lucky that we, the Ugandans, like farming and we end up as small-scale farmers. All we need is a bit of organization, make us part of the value chain, tell us what you want, how you want it, when you want it, and we shall supply. And the manufacturers will be happy because we shall be consistent with good quality.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. I still want to stay with you because the budget the budget did speak to the vouchers, and I'm happy you touched on it. But let's begin with what's affecting us right now. And you know, let's give it to the fact that you, the farmers, and all the farmers in this country have sustained us during this COVID period. And we want to thank them because they've continued to provide us the food amidst the COVID-19. And the food prices, as mentioned earlier by the Bank of Uganda and my colleague Mildred, the inflation has remained low even with food. In fact, the biggest the challenge right now, Victoria, is that the food prices are very low. A bunch of matoke in some of the matoke producing areas is going for 1,000 shillings. Now, you did speak to financing. So the question here is, what would you want be done, addressed based on what the budget is already proposing? Is it agriculture financing? Or are you speaking to financing of agriculture inputs so that we subsidize the farmers to be able to sustain the production of food that has happened over time, yet the pricing right now is too low to allow them to even break even?
No, like I said, in a way, we the farmers have mastered the art of production. That is why there is a glut now. Everything else notwithstanding, we have a glut. So the most important thing is to follow this chain. What do we do in order not to kill the farmer who is already suffering, but to sustain the whole value chain and sustain the economy? What has been happening, and I know we are going to talk about it now and it will continue. What has been happening is that nearly everybody who has tried to invest in value addition has been practically beaten out of the system. How? First of all, these young people would be the best people to invest in that area right now, but they do not have what it takes to withstand the beating of URSB, the Uganda Registration Service Bureau, Uganda URA, then UNBS. In order for one to be on the shelves of a supermarket, you need to go through all those, but they are never there when you need them. You know, there is that somebody will tell you that when you want to register a company, you can do it in one day. In which country? I dare anybody who is listening to me to go to USRB and register your company in one day and give us feedback. Then that is one. Two, when you start, a young person decides to start a company, she looks at this situation and thinks she can manufacture maybe juice out of pineapples, starts producing. Before you have done anything, UNBS will arrive and shut you up, and they will even bring the press and say you were manufacturing without a UNBS mark. So one, you can't sell, and two, we have closed you. There you go down. Then URA, if UNBS does not catch up with you, URA will come and give you such a big bill that you have been manufacturing and you have not been paying. What do I want all this to do? Now that we have discovered that 60% of all our companies are informal, let us work together to get them to be formal. How? Let those three companies, organizations, either the registration, the URA, and the UNBS, let them have a development arm so that they can practically handhold these informal companies to add value to what is rotting now. Because really, bananas are very easy to handle. But now that we have made it practically impossible, how? URA overtaxes machinery for agriculture processing. For some reason, the only equipment you can import without paying tax is if you are going to handle milk. Some of us, I'm from Eastern Uganda, we don't handle milk. We handle sugarcane, we handle other things. Why exempt equipment for milk? Because agriculture equipment should be treated as agriculture equipment, exempt it from taxation. And when it comes to even when it comes to irrigation, quite a lot of irrigation equipment, which is meant for agriculture, is being taxed. What is the reason given by URA? They say because the same equipment can be used for domestic plumbing. Really? As a farmer, I'm going to suffer because this equipment is double use? Isn't it better to temporarily not tax it so that you wait for me when I'm getting the profit? Then three, in Uganda, we do not make packaging material. But the tax on packaging material ranges from 20% to 60%. And when you go to URA to ask, I'm going to import this type of material, how much are you going to tax me? The answer will be, it depends. Then, God help you, you go and import, you arrive, and it depends is then put in words. Now that you have brought this, I think we are going to charge you 50%. It completely throws the maths out of the equation, and the whole project just ends there. So if you want to know why projects don't live beyond 5 years, the killers are three, and they are all government. So what can we do? Let us handhold everybody who is going to get into value addition. If need be, let us give them 2 years tax-free. Because if we give tax holidays to foreigners who, when they saw COVID, ran away, what about our own? Let us give them a tax holiday for 2 years, handhold them, get them to be formal, learn how to do things properly, how to write books. Then after 2 years, they will be taxpayers, and everybody will live happily ever after.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I need to mention that it's as good as you are reporting to police, because you are raised in the room, and that is why we are here, and we want to thank you so much for your contribution. We will, of course, be having the Commissioner Customs tomorrow on day 2 of this conversation, and we will post those questions you asked, Victoria, to him. We also have in this room the Commissioner Domestic Tax, who is also here with us, just in case you need to know the representation that is here from URA. So we have those that are responsible for our taxes, both outside and inside of the country here in the room. We will have the Minister very shortly, who is going to address us from the comfort of his office, thanks to technology that we are beginning to appreciate during COVID-19. But I also wanted to welcome those of you who are joining us on all the TV platforms, UBC, NBS, NTV, and S24, but also those of you watching us online on all those TV stations, Facebook and YouTube channels. We are taking questions, of course, from you, and so you can use those platforms to share your questions. We are also taking questions on Zoom, and if you're watching us on Zoom, you could actually post your question in the comments area. We will be able to capture it. But also, if you are one of those who has seen the number to call for any questions, please don't hesitate to call and ask your question. Somebody at the end of the line will pick that question and will share it with us. So I want now to cross over to the Ministry of Finance and listen in to the Honourable Minister of Finance, the Honourable Matia Kasaija, who not so long ago did pronounce the budget for financial year 2020-2021 on stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs, businesses, and Industrial Recovery. The Honourable Minister, over to you, sir. Do we have the Minister?
Thank you very much.
Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and I am greeting all of you. Sorry we are coming in a bit late, but I've listened to my Muzukuru, Madam Sekitoleko. I will have one question before I get off the screen. So be prepared to answer me one question. Heads of government agencies, members of the media fraternity, fellow Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the post-budget speech e-conference for financial 2021, which is being held as a part of the National Budget Month for financial year 2021. When I read the budget speech for that financial year on Thursday, 11th June, I informed the Ugandans that my ministry was consulting widely to ensure that the budget is properly aligned to the current economic realities arising out of COVID-19 pandemic and the disasters that have recently hit our country, and the aspirations of all Ugandans. I wish to reiterate that, as I indicated in the budget speech, the economic stimulus and growth strategy that the NRM government will implement commencing next financial year and in the medium term is aimed at achieving three main objectives. One, improving the well-being of the people of Uganda. Two, boosting economic transformation. And three, improving peace, security, and good governance. Therefore, with the advent of COVID-19 and its impact on the economy, consultation have continued to ensure that the interventions that the government has proposed in the budget are able to address the needs and everyday aspirations of all Ugandans. I'm glad to inform you that this e-conference forms part of that consultative process. The objective of this e-conference, therefore, is as follows. One, to enable the public to gain further understanding of the budget. It is your budget, fellow Ugandans, not Minister Nakasaja's budget. And you need to understand the various government programs, the expenditure priorities, which we are ready to listen and advise, key interventions and revenue measures therein, in order to benefit from and to take advantage of all these. Two, to obtain feedback that can be used as we implement the intervention in the budget, as well as for future planning and budgeting, so as to speed up the socio-economic transformation of our society as a whole. Fellow Ugandans, I therefore call upon you to listen in and provide constructive feedback, and later, with information that you will have obtained, to participate in the implementation of the government programs through enhanced monitoring and vigilance for better economic outcomes and improved service delivery. Now, fellow Ugandans, this country belongs to all of us. We happen to be in position of leadership, but we don't own. The country is owned by the entire 42, 43, 44 million Ugandans. As our people in statistics are telling us, I think now we are about 44 million people. Therefore, particularly those of you who are what we call old people, above 18, don't simply watch what the government is doing. We want you to be fully participant. If you see something that is not moving well, the opportunities that are available, you let us know, but with good reasons. I hate complaints. Complaints don't help. They don't build you as an individual, but not that the complaints and regrets help us who are in charge of running this economy. We want you to come up with suggestions. Minister, on this we suggest this, on this one we suggest, but not simply complaining about ebintu biri bubi, ebintu biri bubi. Ebintu biri bubi. But so what now? Come up with an idea. Come up with an idea. And if we are in position to act, we shall act. If we are not in position to act, we shall tell you why we cannot act. So therefore, I call upon you to listen in and provide constructive feedback, and later with information that you will have obtained to participate in the implementation of government programs through enhanced monitoring and vigilance for better economic outcomes and improved service delivery. We hear about this question of corruption, and I cannot deny it. It is there. But it is we Ugandans who are promoting it. You go to get a service because you want to cut corners, and you meet an officer. Then you start saying, do me quickly, do me quickly, do me quickly, by offering money. You are promoting. Why don't you refuse and say, no, I will not give you anything, and I'm telling my officers, please, who are listening to me, please stop asking for bribes in order to execute your job. Befriend the business people, make them friends, rather than coercing them. Deliver the service they want, promptly, adequately, as far as the resources are concerned. Then create now a line of friends. You have a friend in United, you have a friend in this, you have a friend in the breweries, you have a friend, wherever the business community is coming. That way, you will be much better off. Should you have a problem in the future, you just need to take a look and say, I have a problem here, brother. Can you give me help? And they will give you a helping hand without necessarily you coercing them. So corruption is being promoted by we Ugandans, particularly those who are demanding services from the government department. So I thought I should really emphasize this question. Now, lastly, I wish to commend all our partners, the panelists, and the guests that have made this event possible. Additional information to the budget can be obtained from the budget website, which is www.budget.go.ug, or the finance website, www.finance.go.ug, and the budget toll-free hotline, which is 0800-229229. Let me repeat. The budget toll-free hotline is 0800-229229. With these few remarks, I thank you and wish you a successful deliberations for God and my country. Now, before I go, Muzukuru, Kyala Sekitoleko, you have said there are three things that kill businesses in Uganda. I'm requesting that you list them for me so that then I can see how to address them. Also, I heard, whether you or somebody else, the registration of a company taking 3-4 days. That should not be now anymore. Any person who wants to register his business, you just walk into the office of Uganda Investment Authority. You may not even need to go to URSB. There's no need. Now with the .com, you can even register a company when you are in Arua without having to come to Kampala, or when you are in Kabale, wherever you are, where these facilities are available. And I want to guarantee you, once you have given all the necessary information in one day, you will get a registration certificate for your business. If you find problems, please get in touch with us. Get in touch with Honorable Anite, with the Minister in charge of privatization and investment. I don't see why now today registering a business company should take a week. Absolutely, that should not be possible. Maybe people are not aware of this information, but now I've given that information. Okay, so Madam Secretary, I want to hear about the 3 things that are killing businesses in Uganda. Some I may know, but I would prefer to hear it from a third party. Thank you very much, and I wish you fruitful direction. And give us proposals, but also give us a solution of how to handle your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We want to thank you for your time and for joining us for this very first post-budget e-conference, coming to you live for you are watching at home or online. We're coming to you live from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics conference hall, and we thank you, Honorable Minister, for your contribution, but also your question to the Honorable Victoria Sechitoloko, who will come to a little later. We want to take a very, very short break. This break is really for television purposes, to allow our broadcasters run their scheduled advertising, and then in the next few minutes we will be back. My colleague Mildred Tuhaise will take on the next session that will include your questions and feedback to the panel. But also joining us on the panel will be the Director of Budget himself, who will be speaking on behalf of the Ministry if there's questions around the budget, because he actually is the gentleman that prepares the budget for the Minister. So he will be able to speak comfortably about this. So I want to thank you. Please use the hashtag KnowYourBudget20 if you're sharing with us any question. And if you must or if you want to, please do go onto the platforms across all the media houses and share your question there. We will be able to pick it. Our teams are collecting this information, and we'll be able to ask your questions during the next session. So we take a very short break. We'll be back. Don't go away.
The 2020-2021 national budget has come at a time when the country is facing the COVID-19 pandemic. To enhance the public's understanding of the national budget and tax policy measures, the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, together with Uganda Revenue Authority, have organized a 2-day e-conference dubbed the Post-Budget Dialogue 2020 under the theme Stimulating the Economy to Safeguard Livelihoods, Jobs, Businesses and Industrial Recovery, happening on the 23rd and 24th of June 2020 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. live on UBC and on all social media platforms. Join the discussion using the hashtag KnowYourBudget20, powered by Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Uganda Revenue Authority, Bank of Uganda, CS-BUG, PSFU, Accord, Siatini and UCAID.
Chakavi Cool Airtel! Become a community champion and keep your friends and family connected.
I was able to become a community champion because I used my Airtel money to buy airtime for my customers, colleagues, and friends. Surprisingly, I will get 3% from Airtel. And if you want to become a community champion or you want to participate, just to go on Airtel Money, there's *185#, go buy Airtel Fanana number, then continue the process. To wait for your surprises from Airtel. I wish you all the best.
Dial *185#, select airtime or bundles, select buy airtime, select for another number, enter mobile number, enter amount, enter PIN to confirm payment.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
The coronavirus COVID-19 is a new infectious disease that causes respiratory illness. However, the Ministry of Health cautions all Ugandans to remain calm and adhere to the Ministry of Health's guidelines. Watch out for the following symptoms which may appear within 1 to 14 days: a fever, sore throat, cough, difficulty in breathing, and body weakness. To prevent infection and further spread of the virus, please play your part by washing your hands with soap and running water for at least 20 seconds or using a 60% alcohol-based sanitizer. Do not shake hands or hug anyone. Maintain a distance of at least 2 meters from everyone, especially when you leave home. Avoid touching your eyes, mouth, nose and ears. When sneezing, use a handkerchief, wash it with soap and dry and iron it daily, or use a tissue and dispose of it immediately into a dustbin. Disinfect and clean surfaces of items or areas that are touched by several people on a daily basis. To report a case, call the toll-free lines on your screen or contact your district health officer. Stay safe, stay home, and do not panic. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health Uganda, WaterAid, UNICEF, and the World Health Organization.
kano okubajjukiza nti olutalo lwe tulimu olwa COVID-19 terunaggwa. Era emmundu yo gy'olina eyinza okutaasa mu kaseera nga kano ye masiki yo. Nga tannakwata ku masiki yo, sooka onaabe mu ngalo ne sabbuuni oba ne sanitizer. Okwate obuguwa bwa masiki yo, ofube okulaba nga buyita emabega w'amatuugo, omale oteekeko masiki yo. Fuba okulaba ng'oyambala masiki yo buli lw'obeera mu bantu banno. Era bw'otuuka okugijjako, kwata obuguwa bwayo bulungi nnyo, ate ofune ewayonjo w'ogiteeka. Bato bannange mbakubiriza obutalondalonda masks ate ne muzambala okujja beera kusaasaanya bulwadde. Wear your mask and stay safe.
Obubaka buno bukutuusiddwako Ministry y'ebyobulamu nga buwagiddwa Precision Media, UNICEF wamu n'ekitongole ky'ebyobulamu mu nsi yonna, World Health Organization.
As you know, we are going to be using these masks until COVID is gone. Before you put it on, make sure that your hands are clean. Wash your hands with soap and water. If you are in a place that you do not have soap and water, ensure that your hands are sanitized. You make sure that you cover the mouth and the nose. You make sure that the loops cover the ears. Make sure that it covers your cheek and it covers your upper part of the nose. If you want to adjust upward, you can adjust like this. When you want to remove, you hold this and you remove. Make sure that you wash this mask and hang it somewhere that is safe to dry, and you iron it.
This message is brought to you by Ministry of Health, supported by Precision Media, UNICEF and World Health Organization.
I think this is a fundamental change.
Authentic.
Don't come near me. Keep your distance.
Definitive.
Stopping the cargo is suicidal, but also unnecessary.
Explosive.
So the issue that whenever Tasfele uses his officers very well, it is the true story. Even me, I will repeat it out, and I see what you do to me. And I have no urge to beat my family.
Candid.
In fact, in my view, the two biggest safeguards is to say power rests with the people.
Informative current affairs talk show. Behind the headlines, the biggest talk show in the land. Coming soon.
Listen. Listen much closely. The world is quieter now. The silence is definite, almost tangible. But this is not a time for sadness. This world in which we have made many memories, lived some incredible experiences, and enjoyed fantastic moments, presents us with a new challenge. It's a time to reflect, a time to stop, pause, so we can play again. It is a time to think about everyone, but meet no one. Our world was meant to bring us together, but for now, our main strength is to remain apart. As we feel the ripples of silence echoing through our cities, kingdoms, mountains, and wildlands, as the African drum is silenced for a while, we know that we will continue to look out for one another, and that together, we'll get through this. Our national parks, island retreats, semi-arid and tropical zones will be rejuvenating and awaiting our return. Today we need to see each other as one. It is important for us to stay healthy, safe, and alive, because when we overcome, we will meet again to give you the warmest welcome to you then.
The 2020-2021
The first ever of its kind, well, COVID-19 and the effects that are coming through, that is happening here at UBOS Statistics House, the conference. And you can be able to follow us live on NTV, NBS Television, on UBC TV and S24. You can also go ahead and interact with us on our social media platforms across our social media platforms of NTV, social media platforms of all the stations that we are partnering with, NBS TV, UBC, and S24. We want to continue with the discussion, and at a later stage also, like I did say, you can be able to participate in by sending in your comments or your questions using the hashtag KnowYourBudget2020. But probably before we go to the next speaker, the Minister of Finance, Honorable Matia Kasaija, actually did pose a question to Honorable Victoria Sechitoleko, who is online, to actually go ahead and answer that. Honorable Sechitoleko, the Minister needed to know or get more highlight on the three aspects that you talked about that actually kill business in Uganda. If you could kindly be able to name those.
Okay, thank you, Mildred. The first one starts with registration. Because when a young person starts, you start making maybe special mandats, and everybody's like, why don't you go commercial? You go to register. You get there and they tell you how you need the articles and memorandums of association. And you ask, and what are those? Because most of our business people are not like graduates. Or what are those? That is a piece of paper which is like this, so you can go to a lawyer and they will do this for you. Why can't we have a generic piece of paper which is at that office? I get there, you give it to me, I fill it in, you stamp it, and it is my articles and memorandum of association. Then they start asking you all sorts of questions when you want to open a business bank account. Because the business bank account, the articles, all those are done at URSB. But when URSB is talking, they never mention those. They just tell you how you can do that in one day. There is no way. I have been there twice because I mentor young people, so I got there. That is URSB. So you go there once, you go there twice. Those 2 days you have not worked, you have not made money, so you are like, to hell, I'll just remain informal. So that is one way of killing a prospective company, which could have become a good company and a taxpayer. That is one. Two. Now, because the registration has proved difficult and you decide to go on anyway, and because all you know is how to make this fantastic juice, you start making the juice, you start packaging it, and everybody tells you how nice it is, so you start selling. Then UNBS hears about it. Before you know it, they will come, they will shut you down. They come with the press. I know a young man who was doing something in Bweyogerere, and as you know, UNBS is in Bweyogerere. They arrived, they closed him, he was in the press. Really, the poor boy was trying to contribute to his economy. Then, if UNBS does not catch you before URA finds out who you are, URA will arrive, and once again, they will close you down, especially, of course, they ask, how long have you been here for the whole year, and you have not been paying taxes? You either pay this or we close you down. Now, if you somehow manage to register, and you start importing equipment in order to up your business, because now you are registered, you want to do good business, you want to bring in better machinery and packaging material. You normally go to URA and ask, if I bring in this, what is the tax? If I bring in that, what is the tax? If you are bringing in agriculture, value addition equipment, let's say you are going to process sugarcane, you are going to process bananas into juice or something like that, they tax the machinery. There's a tax on the machinery. Before you have made anything, you have got to pay tax. And in Uganda, we do not have packaging material. So when you ask how much am I going to pay for this packaging material, the answer from URA is, it depends. They don't tell you it depends on what. That it ranges from 20% to 60%. So you decide and say, I want to do this. So you import the machinery and you import the packaging material. It gets here, and the taxes, they tell you, quite a lot of machinery and packaging material has been abandoned by the importers because the taxes just didn't make it worth it. So what do I suggest the three should do? All the three organizations, URA, UNBS, and URSB, should have a development arm We should have people there who are there to help these new companies to register themselves and go through the whole system so that they have the bank account in their names. They know what the articles on memorandum of association is. They do all. You help them do all that instead of telling them, looking at them and think that they are adults and you think they know how to do it. That is one. UNBS. When UNBS had just started, it used to have a development arm. I don't know what happened. What we need to do now is put that arm back so that instead of UNBS becoming like a police, they are the mother. They mentor these people until they hand them over to URA to say, this one is now old enough to pay taxes. So what should URA do? URA should look at the tax regime so that if you are exempting value addition equipment and packaging material, you don't only exempt milk. When I was looking at the budget, if you are importing certain equipment for milk processing, you don't pay tax. But for everything else in agriculture, you pay tax. All I'm saying is let there be no taxes on equipment and packaging material for agriculture processing. Charge taxes on profits. That's what I meant.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Victoria Sech-Toleko, for that response. I do know that the minister did get that very, very well. At a point in time, we'll definitely be engaging the audience as well, the audience that's also watching online, but we still have a few more speakers. But joining us on the panel right in front, we do have the Executive Director of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group joining us, Mr. Julius Mukunda. Thank you so much. I know big people are never late, they're just held up. Well, he had quite a number of engagements, but it's a pleasure that you have joined us. And we do also have Mr. Kenneth Mugambe, who is the Director of Budget, Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Thank you so much for sparing time to be with us. And probably before we get to our next speaker, Julius, you had a question, wondering whether it's directed to one of these panelists here. If you could, just raise that. Kindly get your mic.
Yes. I'll just start by saying that these are extraordinary times that require extraordinary measures. And in terms of extraordinary times, I think we witnessed that. The country was shut down. We've never seen that. But in terms of the extraordinary measures to get out of this, are we doing enough? And that's where I want to raise my question. I know we have done a lot, the Bank of Uganda, the government, the tax reliefs, budget proposals, but there is one issue that is not being talked about. The governor of Bank of England said that everything is now, all options are on the table, including printing money. It is something everybody is shying away from. And I thought, since I have the Governor Bank of Uganda, maybe if we could shed light on that. Because the challenge in this country is when you leave such a critical decision for street people, we head for danger. But if you take charge and you are the one to provide the technical guidance on that, it becomes better to urge from a point of information. So I just wanted to ask that, what is his view about printing money, considering that our inflation is very low, but also is that our deficit is very, very huge, and it's increasing, not forgetting that the debt burden is also getting high. What is his view about, what is Bank of Uganda view about the printing of money? I just wanted to have an idea about that. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Mugume had highlighted a bit about that, but maybe if you could just do that for also the audience that has just joined us, because I know there are many joining us online.
As Bank of Uganda, are we able to print money? Yes. And give it to who? Commercial banks. So the question is whether, as I said, when we put our measures and we say if a commercial bank lacks liquidity, we are able to provide liquidity for 12 months. the question is now linking the commercial bank, you have given money to a business entity that wants the money. Now, our view is that you can't print money and distribute to the households, or what we call, what is called helicopter money. So even the Bank of England, when it was saying so, it was not saying that you print and then go to the households and start distributing. No. You give liquidity to the entities that you think can be able to render liquidity to business enterprises. And basically that's what we are doing. And I had also said, even the data budget also borrows from Bank of Uganda. When it comes to borrow, basically we are printing money. That's a fact. So that is part of the, I think that's the part of the system of printing money. So.
Sorry about that.
I think we use this.
Okay, we can take Julius's mic.
So, in brief, Bank of Uganda does provide, when we say Bank of Uganda is providing liquidity to commercial banks, CTC, basically, that is printing money. Because otherwise, remember we have been accused that if Bank of Uganda doesn't have capital, how do you then provide, how do you then have money to give out? So once we say we are giving liquidity to commercial banks, we are giving, government is borrowing from the central bank, basically, that is part of the printing of money.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mugume. I would like to put this to Mr. Kenneth Mugambe. We know that literally every sector has been hit, yes, but there is a particular attention to the informal sector that many people would like to have to ensure that they can be able to formalize. Because, I mean, URA needs to expand its tax base. They need to have more people they can be able to pick taxes from, taxes that will later on help develop the country. Many are quite asking what the Ministry of Finance is actually doing to ensure that they particularly support the informal sector to recover, and then the small and medium enterprises.
Okay, thank you, Mildred. You allow me to put off my mask. I'm not extremely comfortable speaking with a mask. I wanted, first of all, before I go to your question, actually, to also comment on some of the issues which I have had in the few minutes when I came in, particularly the issue which was raised by Mr. Mukunda and then, of course, Madam Sechitoreko. I think on the question of this being extraordinary times, it is indeed, they are indeed extraordinary times. And of course, being extraordinary times, I think every single person and entity must act in an extraordinary manner. I believe that both the government and also the individuals, we are all picking lessons actually from these times. I have met a number of individuals who will actually definitely tell you that they need to rethink the way they manage, either their lives or their businesses in terms of saving, enhancing their saving culture, because, they need to, save a rainy day. Definitely on the part of the government, we also need to be much more prudent in managing, whether it is the monetary policy, which Bank of Uganda does, without necessarily being reckless, actually, and then, of course, eventually fueling like inflation, which will undermine the very effort you are trying to make. Now, on our part as budget, we also need to be very prudent in the fiscal management as Ministry of Finance, both in terms of the revenue to ensure that when the Commissioner General, Minister of Finance, of course, has imposed taxes, and the Commissioner General, those taxes are not undermining the very effort of the SMEs you are talking about. We need to be prudent in the expenditure, both in terms of the way we allocate the resources, but also in terms of the way these resources are being, spent. So those are some lessons we have actually definitely learned, which we believe eventually will, impact on the wider Ugandan population, whether it is the individual households, whether it is actually people who are engaged in the SMEs. Because as you realize, many of these actions that government undertakes actually, at the end of the day, actually have either a negative or positive impact, on the population. Now, I think I also came in when your Secretary was talking about agriculture. We deliberately listening to the budget speech, I hope everybody got the message. That at least we tried as much as possible to reorient the thinking, towards supporting the entire agricultural value chain. In the last couple of days, we have been talking about increasing agricultural production and productivity. But what we realize actually is that in order to generate the food benefits of our agricultural sector, we need to look at the entire, value chain, right from production, to agro-processing and manufacturing. So there are two interventions that we are undertaking as government. One, of course, trying to ensure that we put more money in agriculture, so agricultural funding for those interventions which are for the public sector. But we're also tackling another aspect of agriculture, which is actually the agricultural financing. Now that's why the budget of this year has actually emphasized putting more and more resources in the Uganda Development Bank, but not just UDB actually, but also supporting institutions like UDC, because we believe that government can use UDC as its investment arm to intervene in areas probably where the private sector is not immediately willing to go in, where maybe there's a market failure or the private sector doesn't see the immediate incentive to invest in. So UDC should be able to, as an investment arm of government, to go there and actually, bridge that gap. But we're also putting resources in microfinance. And these are the resources actually which are targeting, the SMEs. So we really believe that through these interventions, we'll be able to, address not just the entire agricultural value chain, but also in a way actually impact on the SMEs that you talked about. But also talking about the informal sector in Uganda. I think when we talk about the informal sector, we should not just look at the informal businesses in the urban setting. The majority of the informal businesses actually are the households which are engaged in subsistence agriculture. So some of these interventions we are undertaking, and actually by implication, by the way, if you enhance the incomes and the formalization of businesses of these households, which are part of the subsistence, whether they are the 68% or whatever you call it, whatever the number is, then actually, in a way, you're also helping in addressing some of the challenges we have, for example, in terms of revenue, enhancing the revenue mobilization, in terms of enhancing aggregate demand. One of the key challenges that actually the economy is going to be facing now as a result of COVID is actually people not have effective demand. Because once people are not able to spend, then actually many of these things we're talking about would actually not happen. So we need to ensure that we tackle those areas that will actually help to put incomes in the pockets of the population. And these are the households actually. Because by doing that, then actually the households would actually be able to demand, for the goods and services which Mr. Kayondo is actually producing. Without income in the pockets of these households, then definitely the businesses, whether they are businesses here in the urban areas or across the entire country, will not be able to spend, to sell their products. So these are some of the things that we are really trying to do in this post-COVID difficult situation actually of COVID.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mugambi. I'll definitely be getting back to you and the panel. I want to introduce our next speaker, who is also off-site. It's an e-conference, and this is the chairperson of the Uganda Manufacturers Association, Ms. Barbara Mlwana, who will be speaking to the approaches for industrial recovery for the financial year 2020, 2021, but also beyond, because currently we could be speaking post-lockdown, but there is, because we can't say post-COVID for now, we do not know when COVID will end, but even though we don't know when it will end, it will surely come to an end. But what happens for the industrial sector? I welcome you, Ms. Barbara Mlwana.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank all my past speakers. When you're the last, most of the points have been mentioned, and as UMA, we're very grateful for the government and their support of the private sector in this recovery, and in particular issues around capitalization of UDC, UDB. So we'd also like to thank them for the deferral statutory obligations. And I think, as I've mentioned, most of the points have been mentioned by my past speakers. So I'm really going to pivot on the point beyond, and I have 4 points that I'm going to talk about. The first is the increasing of the level of liquidity within the economy to spur consumption and production. And I know Dr. Tugume was mentioning this on the side of interest rates, on the side of supporting the manufacturing side, on the supply side. But I just wanted to give some context to everybody. 3 million Ugandans in the formal employment have been redundant for 3 years. Therefore, they have limited purchasing power. 7 million non-formal workers, these are people in juakalis, vendors, shops, arcades, all those have been out of work and are still remaining out of work. And close to 1.5 million employees have been laid off during the pandemic. And as we know that the curfew, which is a good measure, essentially means that we don't work 8 hours. It's really sort of 5 hours that we work. So even with the stimulus in production, there is a need for aggregate demand. And as UMA, we have some proposals on that. The first, of course, we've always talked about domestic arrears. And what we are encouraging, when we've heard that, of course, they're going to be settled, but we would like to ask that these settlements are made in the first quarter. I think somebody was mentioning about timing of these things, and I think this is what we're saying, that for us as manufacturers, it is very important that it happens in the first quarter of this financial year. The second one, as I've mentioned, a lot of our employees, a lot of out of work, a lot of people need access to their NSSF savings. So what we would like to push is, and what we'd like to advocate is the early access to their funds. The second one is, as we've seen the URA and the government come up and fast track these refunds. We don't want it to be just a one-off event. We'd like this to be part of business going forward. So that's what we talk about beyond. We'd like them to really embrace this and make this an operational point. The other point that we wanted to mention at the UMA is the mainstreaming of local content in public procurements and facilitation of exports. I know I heard somebody mention about exports, that exports should be a function of our missions, which is a great point. But I'll just give you once again context. Public procurement in Uganda accounts for at least 60% of the national debt. For 2020-2021, it is at least 22 trillion for these procurements. In 2029, however, there was less than 2 trillion that was spent on local economy. And it is therefore important that as part of the budget, we as manufacturers, or we as Ugandans, should participate in that procurement of government expenditure. And these are our recommendations as UMA. PPDA must use procurement as a tool for economic recovery, so that reforms like tweaking bidding documents to ensure local participation and broadening of scope of reservation guidelines are realized in the first quarter of 2021 financial year. Local suppliers should be issued with letters of credit so that they can supply and be paid on time, like the case is for imports. Now, on the point of Uganda's location, we're land linked. We can be a very good hub for the East and Central Africa. We do have DRC, we have South Sudan, but all these countries, as we all know, are volatile. So in order for that to be facilitated and to help lessen the risk, we have, as UMA, of course, been talking about the IRA to facilitate an export guarantee insurance scheme. We've been talking about that. We've talked about issues on border warehousing for us to jump into these markets that are close to us. Once again, I'll give you context. DRC, as I've mentioned as before, buys about $578 million worth of products imported from Belgium, Germany, and all these countries, some of these products that could actually be supported and available from Uganda. South Sudan, $413 million. Once again, these are products that could be sourced and from Uganda. So the other thing that we do say as UMA is that we'd like to ask government that they should push for reforms at the East African community that facilitate true regional trade based on common market principles. And if not, they should be willing to invoke retaliatory measures against any partner state that undermines Uganda's interests at the EAC level. We've also talked as the UMA about the activation, and we're good to hear. We're happy to hear that there's been a lot of movement with the Uganda air cargo, because it's important that maybe some of our exports should be exported to our neighboring countries. So that is also a good point. The third point that we'd like to talk about is the reducing of cost to doing business. Once again, I'll give you some context. Debt servicing, and I heard this before, debt servicing and the cost of public administration constitute at least 13% of the budget of 2021. This development is denying, as it has been mentioned, denying productive sector of the economy resources. Yet resources should be pinned by additional resources employed in the production of wealth, which, as a manufacturer, I'm going to push. All of us in the sector and the private sector have been have had some adjustments in the way that we do business. We have either looked at our cash flow and maybe have had, as I've mentioned, have had to furlough some people. And I think this is a time in which the government should also look, which is a great opportunity and a great time to look at implementing some long-awaited rationalization of some agencies. And I think as we know, some agencies have, there's a lot of duplication in a lot of these agencies. And I think this is one of those measures where if we cut the costs based on what I've mentioned, that there's a lot of public administration debt and money that is spent. These are some of the areas that we believe could also help on that. We've also noted that a lot of our loans are very expensive. I think that was mentioned. And interest payments this financial year is about 1 trillion, which is 8.9% of our budget. Now, I think as all of us, as has been mentioned, as private sector, we've gone and talked to our bankers, asked them for increasing our tenure. We've asked for interest of decrease of our interest rates. We believe as UMA that this is also an opportunity that Ugandan government should also seek to push those initiatives, issues around talking to our bilateral lenders to increase to defer payments maybe for about 36 months, engaging in maybe in decreasing our interest rates. I think it shouldn't be just private sector that are doing that, but it should also be our government that should do that. And then the last point that I wanted to talk about as UMA is taxation and tax administration reforms. Of course, would like to welcome, may I officially welcome our new Director General to his new post. But I'm sorry, I'm going to offer you a challenge. URA has done a great job, and we'd like to thank you. But I think, as has been mentioned, this is a time and opportunity when we need to look at a lot of these laws, the VAT laws, the income tax laws. I mean, one of the things that we're thinking about as the UMA is that if one of my members is reinvesting the proceeds in a business, then why don't we look at a sliding scale for our income tax or a corporation tax? So I think we're happy as UMA to really engage the URA and the government, and I know we have an appointment to come and meet with you. But I think this is a time that we need to look at our some of these tax laws that we have and amend them to go forward. With those points, those 4 points, this is what I wanted as UMA to discuss and to mention on this at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pramlwana, for those points, and definitely many of your questions will be answered. I want to direct a particular one to Mr. Mugambe here on the aspect of domestic arrears, which the industrialist, which the other people have continuously talked about. What is the plan? The feeling is that the money allocated for payment of domestic arrears is not sufficient enough if we are talking about stimulating demand. Like you were saying, let the people have the money in their pockets. But also, are you incorporating and thinking about PPDA as a tool of economic recovery, as Barbara did state in her statement?
Okay. I think on the question of domestic arrears, first of all, there is a provision in the budget of almost 490 billion to cater for domestic arrears. But I think we also need to put domestic arrears in context. There are some categories of domestic arrears which largely do not impact on the Ugandan private sector. Because there is money, for example, we owe international organizations. Okay, so when people look at this big figure of several trillions, they actually look at the totality, but we need to, kind of disaggregate. So what we are doing is to give priority to the domestic areas, especially which impact on the small businesses. Okay, a supplier, somebody on Nkrumah Road who has supplied maybe a few materials or a service to the government. So we have presented before Parliament as part of the stimulus package, additional financing of over 200 billion. So in total, we actually have close to 700 billion in the budget of next financial year to cater for domestic areas. So as I said, we're going to give priority to those domestic areas which directly impact on the Ugandan private sector. So that's one angle we are looking at. Now, in terms of procurement, I think one way, maybe if I had her right, but procurement impacts on the government budget and the economy generally in two ways. One, in terms of the goods and services which government consumes, and then, of course, second, in terms of aspects of corruption. Because one of the key avenues of corruption we know is actually through procurement. And there are a number of reforms which are being undertaken. Actually, the PPDA Act has been amended to ensure that we address some of those aspects. But in terms of procurement of goods and services, we have been keen on a BUBU, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. And actually, as we speak now, there is a local content bill sponsored by a private member, in the House, which would actually properly define, what the Ugandan private sector is and how this local content and BUBU policy can be effectively enhanced, to support local businesses. So we believe that those are two angles that where procurement can be addressed. I think those are the two key things which I picked.
All right, I would like to engage Mr. Mkunda. The responsiveness of the budget to the needs of the citizens, particularly, do you think you're well satisfied as the civil society?
Okay. To a great extent, I think the budget tried to address some of the issues that the youth, the poor women, the elderly have been, the challenges that they are facing right now, especially during COVID. We are glad to see that there are programs where the youth radio program is coming back again. We are glad to see an expansion of the older persons, and I think it is even going beyond to the order of saying 80 years, but also looking at those 60 and above to certain regions of this country, which I think again is a good measure. Is it enough? Probably it's not enough. Could we do better? Maybe we could do better. But maybe why are we not doing better? I think it's just because we have not felt the reality check that at this particular moment in time, we do not have the luxury of being luxurious. that we need to focus our resources to where we think money can come from. And I can tell you is, for example, if we would have got more money, for the youth, for the elderly, for the businesses that are struggling. But if you sit in Parliament and decide to declare new cities, what does that mean? And it becomes a very serious political program that actually these cities must be functional next financial year. That means it is taking away some monies that we would have put in those particular areas. If, for example, we have been singing the song of rationalizing agencies, and up to now we have not taken the steps, let's rationalize and save money, because we are being told we can save close to $1 trillion after if we rationalize. Then we shall not get enough money even to have more maintenance of our roads. We shall not get enough money to have more soft loans, because at the end of the day we rely on our Commissioner General to get more money for us from the struggling businesses. We would also realize more benefits if we were able to finish our projects in time. I think part of the challenges we face in this country is project investment management. If you have a project, a loan that's supposed to have performed for 3 years, 4 years, and is now taking 15 years to be completed, and there, I know Kenneth is being put under pressure, please pay commitment fees, pay penalty fees. I have a nice example, the Usega Mpiji Road. The author general told us we paid 2.4 billion on that, and we haven't even started digging a trench. So it's high time we also begin to demand a very serious focus and say, please, you accounting officers, why is this project not working? Some have got very good reasons, like issues to deal with the land, issues to deal with evaluation. But some of the things are so ridiculous that somebody is saying you have to compensate me, and yet the land is in the lake, or the land is in a swamp, and the swamp belongs to government, and somebody still insists you have to. So we need to tackle those ones. I think COVID-19 has given us opportunities that we need to reflect and begin to look at some of those particular areas. Two other things for me is we could also get more money and do better. And I'm glad that now we have a new team at URA. My colleague talked about reviewing the non-tax rate, the colonial tax rate. You go to ask for a service of 5,000, they tell you go back to the bank and you pay 2,500 for bank charges. And you wonder why even in the first place you're paying 5,000 for that particular charge. We need also to look at appropriation in aid, because the law is very clear. All monies must be collected by URA and taken to consolidated fund. Then it is appropriated by Parliament. Certain agencies are still collecting money and still spending it at the source, and we actually don't know what they are spending them on. That one is the cash cow. We could get money and do better. We could make money to do better if we strengthen the coordination. As of now, I don't think we know how many foreign people are working in Uganda, a register, because Uganda Revenue Authority has not been able to get that register from the Immigration Authority. Are they all paying pay at their full cost? We don't know. Lands, stamp duty.
Okay.
Even our IFM is here, we are told that we could also generate more money if URA was allowed to cross-check it and get some money. So I think it's quite important that we look at some of those reforms and see how we can be able to expand the businesses.
Okay.
And also get some of these opportunities. Lastly, we could have done better to make the budget even more refocused if we are also focused in terms of what exactly, if we say productivity and production, maybe we should begin to say how many tons of maize are we exporting or are we producing?
Okay.
I think that definitely would help us. How many exports in terms of value are we having? How many jobs are we creating? Because I think that can help us target and say, okay, we were targeting 100,000 and we got 500,000. Maybe it's a plus on our part. So I think it would be very important that if we are able to do some of those particular reforms, definitely we can do better. But we definitely appreciate the current challenges we are in, but also the efforts that we have made as a country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Director Budget, I'll give you just 30 seconds. We need to get to
just 2 points I wanted to make, actually. The first one is on the extent to which the budget is focused on the citizen. One, we are undertaking a review of the budget, and I think that point has been made and it has come out in the media. You realize the budget was presented in Parliament before pre-COVID, actually, by the nature of our budget calendar. Because our budget calendar requires us actually to make the first budget presentation in Parliament at the end of December.
Yes.
So by 1st of January, of course, there was no COVID at that time, and nobody could predict, where we were headed. So we decided, given that scenario, we have been undertaking a number of discussions with stakeholders, just like the minister mentioned in his opening, to see the extent to which or what additional work we need to do to refocus and realign the budget with the needs of the citizens. So a number of stakeholders are in discussions with us, including Mr. Julius Mukunda, who is representing the civil society. So actually, this is an opportunity now. And I really believe that given that, civil society is now part of us, they will definitely help us where maybe we didn't put our eyes properly. They will help us to ensure that we actually have that focus. They are part of this, discussion. But beyond that, I think we need to look at, if you want, you can look at Uganda in 2 kinds of categories. If you look at the entire population of Uganda, you have the rural households, people who live in the rural areas, and then of course you have the urban households. Now the rural households, as I said, you have people who are engaged in subsistence, farming, and then of course you have people now who have graduated towards semi-commercial and commercial farming. The needs of those 2 categories are different. And then you look at the urban areas. The urban areas, of course, you have people who are engaged in the informal businesses, and then people who have more formalized businesses. But of course, because of our high rate of urbanization, we are also getting a 3rd category of people who are highly vulnerable, okay? Actually, theirs are like informal businesses, and those ones actually make them much highly vulnerable in case of any economic shock. So in the case of a shock like this one we have had, those ones actually largely lose all their assets, and actually they lose their jobs and income, okay? And they need a different, so we have tried to segment, to look at society in those different aspects, and try to identify interventions that would address the needs of those different interventions. Okay, so like for the very vulnerable, of course, those are the guys who are targeting using social protection. Because actually when they go to distribute food, okay, that is actually some form of social protection. The food doesn't go to Mildred, to Haise, or Maurice Mugisha, definitely, no, it doesn't. It goes to those vulnerable, because they already have lost their incomes, and they're in a very bad situation. Now, the last point I want to make, on AIA, what we traditionally call appropriation in aid, which is actually non-tax revenue. Our policy now is that non-tax revenue should be collected by URA. As we speak, we have just a few agencies, by the nature of their laws, the rules which put in place these agencies, and also their operations, that are retaining non-tax revenue. This is Uganda Wildlife Authority and agencies like Uganda Communications Commission. But the bulk of the institutions, including universities, public universities now, the money goes to the consolidated fund. So we undertook a reform to ensure that all these resources, and actually it has helped, because when we put all these, some of these institutions, under URA and also remitting their money to the consolidated fund, some of their revenues actually almost, doubled, meaning there was poor, disclosure and accountability of these resources. So this is a reform which we have undertaken, and definitely we are not going to stop. We are continuing to ensure that all these resources go under the armpit of URA, because it is actually the mandate of URA to collect revenue for the government.
Thank you so much, and that's very great. We need more money in URA, because this is the same money that works for the development of our country. Well, we want to move on to our next speaker. Our time is fast spent, and he is a co-founder of Safe Border. We probably have been customers of Safe Border. You've seen it, the organization that comes with it. And he will be speaking to how the budget will promote innovation, job creation, as well as entrepreneurship among the youth. Youth are a key stakeholder in the country, because besides, the demographics show that the greater percentage of the population are youth. Mr. Ricky Thompson, I welcome you to speak to us. Ricky?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for hosting me on this discussion. It's a very special discussion. It means so much to me and many other young people. Of course, I've taken a lot of time to think about what I should say, especially when it comes to the budget e-conference that is happening today. I started by actually thinking that, first of all, who is a young person? And how can this budget help young people and also promote creativity, promote entrepreneurship, and promote more innovation? I think it's also clear, it's also good for us to try and understand that young people are really like a group of people with very unique characters. Today, as we speak, young people are the most energetic. They are clearly the #1 risk takers because we always say that most young people, maybe they have a lot to lose, but they don't really realize they have so much to lose. Also, they're big dreamers, but also they're super creative. I remember very well myself when I was coming to Kampala in the year 2007. All I had was hope, and all I had was to dream and to believe that at a certain point, things will be better and I will be able to reach the promised land. Most cases when people have so much energy and they dream a lot, that kind of energy needs to be guided at a certain point. Now, although today I'm here alone, I represent the largest group of people in this nation, and you will all agree with me. And to a certain extent, with the discussion that I had with other key members of fellow young people, many people said, like, Ricky, please tell them that the budget should be able to understand the young people and should be able to support the young people and take them to the promised land. We actually had a discussion and had to look at initiatives like Safe Border, like Makanika.com, like Insiboko. These are great innovation that has created a lot of employment for many other young people. Look at Safe Border today. We've created direct employment for over 20,000 young people in Uganda, been able to take the innovation from Kampala to Nairobi. We have crossed border. We've been able to take the innovation to West Africa in Ibadan. This is something that should make our country much more prouder. And it makes many other young people very proud of what fellow young people have been able to do, because we actually need to be in a position where we create more opportunities for ourselves. Now, the issue then comes to the budget allocation. And also, let me just give you an idea that currently the situation in the transport industry does not appreciate the innovation made by the industry operators. We kind of feel like government, there's still a way that government looks at creativity and innovation. And basically our advocacy line is really like government should look at us as close partners and be able to closely work with us, and basically do not look at us as a group of young, crazy or very creative people that needs to be regulated. I think we need to be looked at as partners who can contribute towards the betterness of this country. It's clear that young people are very creative, and they have so much energy, and that's actually the truth. But what we really need is that we have our elders and we have the leaders who have got the experience. We need to be mentored. We need to be supported. We need to be introduced to other businesses for purposes of partnership, and this is what we call business linkages. We need policies that actually continues to support young people and support the creativity of young people. And also, most importantly, we need investment, especially in the areas of technology. Today, as I speak, the startup ecosystem requires a lot of investment, and this is lacking. And by the way, to be honest with you, we look at government as the only savior in this space. Because as I speak today, young people are really suffering from a lot of other avoidable costs. When you look at people who want to appreciate and use mobile money, you also look at the cost that people go through to actually access and transact using mobile money. And you also look at the cost that young people, because most of us are are using internet, and we need internet like full time. You look at the cost that that we go through to access internet, and how it has become almost not affordable for many young people. And you look at areas that actually is the biggest employer of young people, that's agriculture. And basically, when you look at internet connectivity, it's basically in the urban centers, you know. For people who live in Kampala, you'll realize that when you live in the areas, when you stay and work in the areas of Nakasero, Kororo, and Naguru, and possibly in Tinda, Bukoto, you have better internet connectivity. But I actually had a chat with my friend that what would happen if you go up country to your villages, to where the farms exist, to where you actually, where you need the infrastructure. Like up country, it's actually even impossible to make a phone call even when you're up country. So it will really, because agriculture today is the biggest employer of young people, followed by transport. And I really think that these kind of areas requires a lot of infrastructural development. And I think government should do all it takes to invest in infrastructures, especially when it comes to internet connectivity and these kind of areas. My recommendation and my appeal, though, to the government is really like, please do all it takes to involve young people in decision making. I don't think young people feel that they are being engaged enough, but I'm here representing them, and I think this is a very good beginning, and I'm proud of that, and I appreciate you all. This is very important. When you involve young people in decision making, it will prepare them for the future, because the future lies in the hands of young people. Prioritization on budget allocation, especially in the areas of internet connectivity and boosting innovation. I think this is something there should be maybe free Wi-Fi's to small SMEs, and also better infrastructures across the country, especially up country where we have our farms, where we need to monitor our animals, where we need to monitor our crops. I think there is need for better internet connectivity. The unfortunate truth is when you drive out of Kampala from here to Luero or after Bombo, you might not be able to participate in a Zoom call like this. And also, I always keep saying, do whatever is possible to reduce the cost of internet. Today, when you look at the cost of internet and you compare it with other countries, even in East Africa or beyond Africa, it becomes very, very expensive compared to what other people are saying, what other people are paying. And also, please increase investment for startups. Startups require investments in lines of grants, seed funding. We need some funding to help us continue with our creativity. The unfortunate truth is, if government does not come in to invest in young people, if government does not come to invest and give us some funding to help us, we're going to have initiatives coming out of Uganda, but the unfortunate truth is it won't be owned by Ugandan because there's no investment. Today, as I speak, it's very difficult to attract local investors to invest in technology, especially in the space of technology. And of course, as Safe Border, it has been very difficult for us. And many other young people who are in the space of technology will tell you it has been very, very difficult for them to attract investment, especially when you talk about technology, because most people are really like they understand more of like other topics, not technology. So we think that young people should be on the forefront, and they should be engaged much better. Thank you.
Ricky, I think you've been well heard, and some of your questions will definitely be answered. We have a number of questions that are coming through, but I don't think time is going to allow us to answer many of them or most of them. But of course, we will be postponing them for tomorrow, but you can continue sending in your questions. The hashtag is Know Your Budget 2020. Many of these are actually also directed to the Uganda Revenue Authority, which is in part of the discussion tomorrow. We will be getting those ones right there. Maybe from Ricky's discussion, and as we get our concluding remarks to a time, I want to go to Mr. Mugambe. Do you think that we have paid enough attention to the aspect of research or funding research? Because for innovation to stem up, research is a very key aspect. And also investment for startups like Ricky has said, how much attention is being paid to that?
Okay, we have provided money in two categories largely for research. We have funding under Makerere University for supporting research and innovations. We have a fund of 50 billion, which we have been running. Next year will be the second year running, so that will make it 100 billion. We started this year. We have an innovation fund under the Ministry of Science and Innovation. In fact, specifically this year, we have provided 17 billion for scientists who are innovating in COVID-related innovations. So that fund is under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. We also have a related fund under the Ministry of ICT, largely for ICT innovators. And then, of course, we have been providing money for, incubation under the Uganda Industrial Research Institute. So once you have done your innovation, then you have an opportunity then to go to URI, the Uganda Industrial Research Institute, and ensure that this can actually be incubated. And then, of course, eventually you can commercialize your idea. Those are some of the interventions we are undertaking.
Okay.
Under that. But I also wanted to use this now to comment on two other things. One, the question of debt. We are definitely mindful about public debt to ensure that we remain in very high, sustainable levels. Now, the challenge of debt, of course, twin problems actually. One, you need to increase your revenue, of course, to borrow less. Short of that, then, of course, you have to meet your gap by borrowing. But also, number two, you probably need also to kind of minimize your appetite for taking on, more and more either public investments or public interventions. So in those difficult challenges, circumstances, we are trying to ensure that we remain, sustainable within our debt levels. Now, the last point I wanted to make, which I think came from the speaker from Safe Border, is the interventions we have put up for supporting particularly the youth. You remember we created three key interventions. There is the Youth Fund under Ministry of Gender, there is a Women Fund under Ministry of Gender, and there is the Emyoga intervention under the management of State House. Now, those interventions combined have a total allocation of almost 300 billion. So we really believe that if the youth take advantage of these interventions, they will have an opportunity to grow their businesses, actually, to be able to access funding and be able to grow their businesses. Then, of course, there are also the other category of the youth who can take advantage of the financing we put in the traditional microfinance, institutions, leave alone the development and the commercial banks. So those are some of the interventions which really the youth can take advantage of to enhance their businesses. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'll receive in less than a minute. So your closing remarks, I'll start off with you, Mr. Kayondo.
Thank you very much, and I think I go into specifics as we close. That yes, Dr. Mugume's presentation was talking about loan restructuring, but on our side, if we want these businesses which have already been surviving to survive, sincerely, it should go beyond just loan restructuring, and you dictate over, prevail over these commercial banks, and they shelve the interest which has been accrued during the lockdown. Otherwise, our businesses are going under. Okay. Then going again into specifics for the DFIs, if we are to accept them here, let us have an equity portion of Ugandans so that they don't repatriate 100% of their collections. Specifically, number 3 on tourism sector, since it has been so supportive when during the times of good times, please let us sustain these businesses, not by going for the loans, because right now we want their survival. Go direct and support them to sustain their staff. Give them grants, not like UDB is putting it, that before you can get this, access this grant, you must take a loan and then partly it will be a grant. Okay. Let us have a particular fund to help them
pay for the salaries and maintain their websites. Again, I think finally it is the ESC. Madam, I think my brother here talked about the ESC protocol. Seriously, we need to have serious talking, because when it comes to Ugandans who are investing in Uganda, the ESC members will own 100%, but when we try to relocate business across East Africa, they are asking for equity of 30% in these other capitals. And I think we should do that. If it is the way you treat my citizens, that is exactly how I should treat yours. Because common market protocol is differently stated. It should be that we are free in the movement of capital and the goods, which is not happening, and they are putting restrictions on our products. I think these are some of these the interventions which we can start with. Then we can ensure that there is import substitution, and then we go into export promotion.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Mkonda.
I think I just sent on.
I kindly request, if it's possible, to get your mask.
Just one thing, let us, as government, stop importing importers.
Thanks, Kayon. I just had one message, and I think I will echo what our Minister for Finance said. Fellow Ugandans, wherever you are, that health center near you is yours. It's not for, it is not CBR government, it is yours. It must function. Please go to it and ensure that it functions. That the health workers are there and the medicines are there. That primary school you are thinking about, that it is for UPE, it is also yours. Because it is your money that is being used to make that school function. Go to it and ensure the teachers are teaching and that the headmaster is teaching. And finally, I think for me is, I was very happy to find that even the Army Water has got a URA ED stamp. Now, if Uzima Water has agreed that they start also paying taxes in full, what about others? I think it's high time that we begin to shun away those who are not paying their proper taxes, because they are denying us service delivery. That we only buy from those we know that are tax compliant. That can help us improve our tax base, but also help us to ensure that there is service delivery in this country. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a wonderful discussion. Probably we should be doing it every 6 months to also to gauge how far we have gone. We always have nice discussions at the budget level, and then somehow we go to sleep. But I think this should be something that really continues in terms of discussing and guiding where we think we are going. As Bank of Uganda, we believe, yes, our contribution in the whole exercise is, yes, keep inflation as low as possible while stimulating economic activity. And I think our angle of doing that is to ensure that commercial banks have liquidity at cheap rate, and wherever we see that the commercial banks are not subsequently pushing the liquidity we have given to the businesses, then we have to hold them responsible. And I think going forward, we will come up with a mechanism actually shaming those who are not responding to some of the monetary policy intervention.
Well, thank you very much. We can't wait for that as the public. Well, any closing remarks? Oh, you can use this. Yes, please. And after, I will kindly invite my colleague, Morris.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the moderators for a good job done. Of course, as you probably know, this post-budget dialogue is actually the last event in our budget preparation process. So this actually marks the end of the budget preparation as we prepare to start budget execution. Our budget preparation is extremely long. We start in September of the previous year, so as you can imagine, and then we are finishing now in June. So it takes us almost 9 months actually. But of course, in between, there are some events which overlap. So I really want to thank all those who are engaged in this process. I think to the wider Ugandan public, the message I would want to send out is to request that people keep having interest in the budget. Whether you are somebody in the business community, or whether you are a farmer out in the rural areas, or you are just an ordinary citizen. Because at the end of the day, in one way or the other, the budget will impact on you, either you paying taxes or you being a beneficiary of the services that the government delivers. So if you do not pick interest in the budget, then you are likely to lose out actually on either of those things. Either the services will be poor, in which case you will not be holding government officials accountable to deliver the services, or maybe the Commissioner General will tax you and jury, and then of course you will also bear the burden of the tax. So it is important that as Ugandan citizens, we all keep having interest in the budget at every stage of the budget process. We have undertaken this process for the last couple of years, and the whole objective of this process is to ensure that we keep enhancing interest of the public in budget issues, but also to ensure that on our side, of course, committing ourselves to open up the budget so that people can actually have information on the budget, so that they are able to question actually the budget, but also contribute actually to shaping and preparing the budget. Because as I said, of course, at the end of the day, the budget will impact on you. But of course, more importantly, is to ensure that we enhance public accountability, okay, for the delivery of public services. So that all these resources, which the minister pronounces, 45 trillion, by any means is not little money. Okay, even if you just simply look at the portion which goes directly for service delivery, it is in trillions of shillings. So that's why it is important that we all keep interest in this budget, particular issues of accountability, to ensure that there is value for money at the end of the day. So as we close, I would like to thank, of course, the panelists who have been, especially those ones who have been here since morning. And then, of course, you, the audience, which is right here before us, but also the audience which has been following this event via the different media channels. Now, in these COVID eras, unfortunately, we don't actually have lunch, so I should not take more of your time. So let me stop here and thank you and wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Budget. I have been informed that sometimes when we speak, please remain seated. We will close shortly. That when we are speaking, it's only smarter that you actually remove the mask totally, not the Julius Mukunda way, because it is actually not allowed. And so you're better without, so we know you don't have it, or you're wearing it. Okay. I want, in a very special way, as the Ministry has mentioned, to thank our hosts, the Ministry of Finance, and of course URA with our partners, CSBAG, PSFU, and Siatini. We want to thank you all for joining us. What I want to do is quickly run you through tomorrow's program, our Day 2 program, that will include or discuss financing the national budget and then undertaking the tax policy measures for 2020-2021. We'll have with us the Minister of State from the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Gabriel Ajedra. We'll have the Commissioner General himself, who will be talking to us on setting a new agenda for tax revenue mobilization. We'll have the Commissioner Domestic Taxes, who's also here with us, Patrick Muchibi. He'll be speaking to us on the tax amendments, incentives, and opportunities for Ugandans. As mentioned by several people, even the questions we received this on day one, talking a lot about the customs. We have the Acting Commissioner Customs, who will be talking to us on the customs tax amendments and also the incentives and opportunities for Ugandans. We'll then have a conversation with the senior country partner, PwC. We have the ED Siatini here, but she'll be speaking tomorrow, Ms. Jen Nalunga. We have the chair of the Private Sector Foundation Board, Honorable Eli Karuhanga. We'll have the IMF country representative. We also have the chairperson of the Budget Committee of Parliament, the Honorable Amos Lugolobi. We'll then have the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, who's also the Minister of Finance, Patrick Ochailap, and we'll then have all these questions that have been generated from day one and day two put together for our panel that will be here tomorrow. So we really encourage all of you to join us for this conversation, but we want to thank all of you for being part of this very first e-conference, post-budget e-conference. And thank you so much for joining us, to our television partners, UBC, NBS, NTV, and S24, and all of you joining us on our social media platforms using the hashtag KnowYourBudget20. Thank you so much from all of us, myself and Mildred. It's good afternoon and see you tomorrow.
2020-2021, when the country is facing the COVID-19 pandemic. To enhance the public's understanding of the national budget and tax policy measures, the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, together with Uganda Revenue Authority, have organized a 2-day e-conference dubbed the Post-Budget Dialogue 2020 under the theme, Stimulating the Economy to Safeguard Livelihoods, Jobs, Businesses and Industrial Recovery, happening on the 23rd and 24th of June 2020 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. live on